Hello, friends. Welcome to Feeling This Life. We're a family support podcast that dives deep into the triumphs, challenges, and strategies that are part of the lives of those who care for children with blindness and visual impairments. I'm Paige Maynard, and I'm an early interventionist and teacher of the visually impaired at VIPS, Visually Impaired Preschool Services.
And I'm Dr. Cathy Smith, Director of Research at Anchor Center for Blind Children in Denver, Colorado.
I'm Jenny Castanier. I am the Family Services Coordinator at VIPS, and my youngest child has a visual impairment.
Today, I am thrilled to introduce Catarina Rivera, professional public speaker on disability awareness, inclusion, accessibility, advocacy, and allyship, and Instagram star. That's how I know her. I've had the pleasure of seeing you speak and following your career for a while. Would you be willing to tell us a little bit about yourself and your visual impairment?
Thank you for having me here today. First thing I want to share is that I don't personally use the term visual impairment. I stay away from the word impairment when I talk about disability. It's not to negate my disability, I just don't connect to the term impairment. So the term that I use is vision disability.
Okay.
That's what I'm using for myself.
All right.
And so a little bit about me. One of my key messages that I'm sharing with the world in general is that being disabled doesn't mean that I have a bad life. That's something that's so important for me to share, that I have a great life. I have traveled to over 30 countries now. I have started 2 different grassroots nonprofit programs and 2 for-profit businesses. I've been fortunate enough to access higher education. I have 2 graduate degrees. One is in education and one is in public health. And in addition to all of that, I also have Usher syndrome, which is the most common genetic cause of combined deafness and blindness. I've been hard of hearing since birth, and then I've worn hearing aids in preschool, and my vision disability was diagnosed at 17 years old. That's when I found out about Usher syndrome. It was challenging for a while for me to adapt because it felt like such a big change in my life, and I didn't really know that much about blindness. I think in general society, there is a fear about blindness. There's not a lot of accurate information that is shared about, for example, that blind people are independent and have agency, and there's so many ways to do things, for example. But my biggest issues today, thankfully, are not with the fact that I have Usher syndrome. It's really dealing with the lack of access, the inaccessibility of the world around me, the barriers that make it unnecessarily difficult for me, the attitudes of other people who lack awareness. So I unfortunately really have to do a lot of work to adapt to the world instead of the world adapting to me. So that's one of the reasons that I do what I do now. I started Blindish Latina on Instagram in 2020. It's been an amazing space to share my story, to show myself traveling now that I've been traveling full time. And I really care about providing representation. I know how hard my personal journey was with my identity, my disability identity. So to show myself now, I know that I can help other people who might be struggling, who even like parents sometimes reach out to me and say, "Oh, I'm so glad I found your page. This is making me feel better about my child's future. You know, they have vision disability as well." And so I am excited to be able to provide representation in that way.
And that is exactly why we wanted to have you on our podcast, because we feel like we are in kind of a unique place working with parents of children with vision disabilities. Thank you for sharing your preference with me so I know how to say it, and helping them to learn that they can advocate for their child as their child grows older to make the world more accessible for them. So that's really, you're a great person to have on this show. So thank you. As someone who supports others in the disability space as well as having a disability, this season we're talking about self-care. So what does self-care mean to you, and how do you practice it in your daily life?
I love that you're highlighting self-care. It's incredibly important. And a lot of self-care for me is about managing my energy, especially given that I travel and I sometimes have to deal with new environments or inaccessibility in my environment, or even if I deal with a microaggression. Like, for example, I remember one time I was in Portugal and I went to a self-care appointment. I was going to a salon. I decided to take the public transportation, like a subway type of transportation, just because I felt like I had extra energy and I like to challenge myself to be independent in new places. So I said, okay, I'm going to go there on the train. And woo, that took a lot of energy out of me. It was good. But then later that day, I said, okay, now I'm going to make things easier for myself. So I think, for example, if I like a restaurant in a place and I know that it's not loud and I can have vegetarian food, and then I might go back to that same restaurant multiple times in a trip. And that kind of balance between pushing myself and returning to familiar, comforting routines or places is one part of self-care for me. Another part of self-care is having fun, doing things that nourish myself, bring joy to my life, because that recharges me, that helps me keep going in my mission. So things like eating well. I love food and I eat mainly a vegetarian diet, but being able to try new foods or do a cooking class or food experience, that can be really fun and exciting for me. I try to walk and close my rings on my Apple Watch. That's something that I try to do on a regular basis, get some energy from that and get it outside during the day. That really helps me. I also am working on my rest. I know rest is important. For me, in particular, something that I have struggled with, and that's something I will continuously work on. So when we're talking about joy and self-care, things that bring me joy, seeing friends, salsa dancing, having fun travel adventures. So if I book a tour or something different, and when I'm traveling, I do schedule time to talk to my friends online on a Google Meet chat where I can have the captions and read the captions, and that helps me feel connected. The other aspect of self-care that is important to me is just taking care of myself and the things that I like to do for myself, like facials, haircuts, other self-care services. So I try to keep that as a regular part of my life. And I think when you treat yourself well, you're just affirming your own worth and you feel better about yourself.
I agree. And I love watching when you're doing some of those self-care routines on your Instagram page. It makes me happy that to see someone else taking care of themselves and some of the very fun things that you do. And I think it's important for parents to think about, maybe it's just having your kid's favorite food because they had a rough day. So I like that you do that for yourself, but that's a good way to teach young children that they deserve to have a reward for making it through the day sometimes, right?
Yeah, definitely. Just celebrating those moments, affirming yourself. There's so many other mental health things that are beneficial, like visualizing, affirmation, journaling, gratitude practices. There's so much to do out there.
Great. So caring for yourself and your belongings and others can be an important part of self-care as well. Do you feel that your vision disability impacts the way that you do any of those self-care tasks?
My vision disability impacts everything in my life. I always adapt. I recognize what my strengths are. There are things that I can do well. Maybe I do them differently there are other things that I experience challenges with depending on where I am. So for example, when I was living in New York City, cooking was something that I did very often, and I loved it. I also was in an environment that I knew very well. I selected all the tools that were in my kitchen. When I'm traveling, I cannot select the tools that are in my kitchen. I have to deal with whatever's there. I have seen so many different types of ovens, ways to work the ovens. And there are many places that have not provided oven mitts, or they provide a rag or, a towel. Yeah. And I am not familiar or comfortable with using a towel to pull out a hot pan. So as I've traveled, I've cooked less and less, and that's become something that my partner has taken over. Mm-hmm. And that is okay. It's okay for us in our relationship to determine what am I going to contribute and what is he going to contribute to the household. One of my strengths is researching, using the computer to plan travel, using my phone to look at maps, find places for us to eat at, for example, and handle logistics. So I basically handle anything that is logistical for our travel, for our lives. And so he's contributing to the household by cooking, washing dishes, oftentimes doing laundry, although I have a very accessible laundry situation right now, so I'm doing more 50-50 with the laundry. But it doesn't mean that I can't do these things. It's just we found a way to kind of play to our strengths. And if I am going to do something that I know takes me longer, like washing dishes can take me a long time, especially if I'm doing that by hand, I sometimes make a moment of it. I put my tripod with my phone up. My phone connects Bluetooth directly to my hearing aids. So I'll put on a fun show, a reality show, and I'll just wash the dishes and enjoy the show. And I know it's going to be slow going, but just having that acceptance is fine. I don't need to rush. I can make it a fun part of my day. So I don't pressure myself to do things in a way that doesn't serve me. And I also outsource whenever I can. For example, cleaning. I don't enjoy cleaning. It takes me a long time. Cleaning a house, cleaning a bathroom. So yes, we hire out for that. And when I don't fix my own eyebrows, I go to someone else, because every time I look in the mirror and I'm doing my eyebrows, a new hair appears. I miss something every time. And it takes way longer than I want it to. Like, I'm not okay with the length of time that it takes me. So I think those are some of the ways that I approach things. And I think that someone might be listening and saying, oh, well, I kind of do the same thing. Living with a disability just means that we have access needs. We have our own lived experience, but every human being has needs, and they have things that they're good at and they're not good at, or things they enjoy and they don't enjoy. And so I think we can relate to the adaptation and how we kind of figure out who's going to contribute what in a household, for example.
What a great answer. I think most couples could learn from your answer, going with our strengths and taking turns and doing what you're best at. Wow. And you're right. That has absolutely nothing to do with your vision disability. So, and I have somebody do my eyebrows too. So I completely understand who wants to do their eyebrows, right? What lessons, and this is, you probably could talk for an hour on this, and I know we don't have that kind of time, but what lessons have you learned about resilience and adaptability in your life as you've gotten older and had to adjust to your vision disability?
Mm-hmm. Well, my feelings on resilience in general is that I think it is something, when we talk about resilience and adaptability, we often talk about the disabled community's strength in these areas. Disabled people are creative, adaptable, they're so resilient in the face of barriers. I don't think that disabled people should have to be this resilient. we're resilient because we live in a world that's not designed for us, that does not value us and include us as a default. The expectations of resilience are that you are the one kind of rising in the face of these challenges, but it really should be easier for us. The world shouldn't require us to be just resilient, amazing people. We should be able to go into any establishment, not have to research ahead of time whether a space or an event is accessible for us, to not have to have so much courage to go to a job interview. There's just really important need for us to flip, I think, our view of that. But as disabled people, we will always adapt. Many of us are creative, are ambitious. For example, it can be hard for some disabled people to get a job, especially if they have an apparent disability. So we become entrepreneurs. And so there is a higher percentage of entrepreneurship within our community. And some people are loving it. Like maybe they would have been entrepreneurs anyway. Like I love entrepreneurship. I was in the traditional workforce and I was able to be there. But I love entrepreneurship and that's why I'm doing this. But some people are forced out of the workforce or not able to enter. And so that's why they're doing this. And it's also clear, I think, with product design, how creative and adaptable we are. Disabled people are often finding that products are not designed for us. So we make our own adaptations, or we even find things that are accidentally adaptive. I love when people share videos of things that are in the marketplace that are not designed for disability, but disabled people find them and say, oh, perfect, I can use this for my disability. This is going to work for me. And I think that's really fun. A lesson about resilience, adaptability, and a personal side for me is when I was diagnosed with Usher syndrome. I was 17 years old. I had such a fear of blindness and fear of my future, but learning about technology and accessibility features that existed showed me that I could be supported in the future to do anything. And my fears were unfounded. And these are things like screen readers, text-to-speech, accessibility features of phones and laptops, Braille, zooming features, like I just zoom in on my phone all the time, Zoom software, white canes and adaptation apps, Be My Eyes. There are so many things out there. And I've really learned from when I was 17 years old to now that there are plenty of ways to do things. Blind people might do them differently. So I'm very clear that we need to stop thinking of the non-disabled perspective as the default on our world.
Great. Yeah. And as a teacher, my background, I've been doing this for a long time, a long time, and seeing the changes in accessibility and technology is really exciting for me. Because I do know, I think about some of my past students and how could I have, how much more could I have taught them if we had only had some of these things. So I'm really happy to hear that you embrace these new things and that the community embraces it, because I think do we still need to teach Braille? Yes. But do we need to embrace technology as well? Yes, for sure. So it's very heartening to hear you say how that has helped you. So last question, do you have any strategies for building a supportive community of fellow caregivers? So thinking about those parents who have a young child with a vision disability and they are not as familiar with the good things that we can learn and who can offer emotional and practical support. How can they build a more supportive community?
I would say that first of all, building a supportive community around you is very similar to making friends. You're looking for people that you share common experiences with, common values that are fun to talk to, that you can relate to. So if you think about how you find friends and look for friends and invest in friendships and connect to people, sometimes you have to make an effort. Sometimes you have to look for where these people are that you can potentially connect with. And you have to have a foundation to build upon. If it's not an authentic connection, it's not going to grow that much. So I encourage parents who are looking to connect with other parents who have children with vision disabilities to connect online through social media for sure. Facebook groups are a great resource in many cases. I also encourage families, beyond connecting to other parents who understand your situation, connect to disabled people directly, connect to blind adults who can serve as mentors and resources for your child and for your family overall. Because when you are a parent and perhaps this whole situation is new to you, you might have some of the same fears that I did when I got diagnosed, because society told me, wow, blindness is really scary, or blindness is a terrible thing that can happen to you. And how, I had a lot of concerns about my life and what was possible for me. And now I think I'm living just a fabulous life. So I would love to kind of keep letting parents know that the future for their children can be very bright, and we want to encourage our kids to be independent and have experiences and adventures. So one book that I recommend for parents can read is Haben Girma's memoir. Haben is the first deafblind graduate of Harvard Law School. And she has a story in her book about wanting to go on a trip abroad with her school, I believe, and her parents were really scared to let her go. So I encourage you to check the book out so you can see how that turned out. I also think that conferences and organizations can be really helpful as well. There are lots of organizations centered around blindness. I only caution that you pay close attention to how these organizations are speaking about blindness and low vision. Is it always framed as something that needs to be cured and fixed? Or are we really empowering families and kids to think about, okay, living well and adapting and accessibility and some of the other things, and ableism, that really impact our daily lives? So if we focus 100% on a cure, we really are not feeling empowered about our daily lives. And I think we kind of take away the path to acceptance and to disability pride and some of the wonderful things that I've benefited from. So I do encourage all parents and families to take time to learn about ableism, what it is, and making sure that you're not perpetuating ableism within your family and internalize ableism within your children. There are many resources out there. Of course, social media, following disabled people, and educators like me, fabulous. There are books by disabled authors. Disability Visibility, edited by Alice Wong, and Demystifying Disability by Emily Ladau are the two books I recommend as starting points. And I also recommend the documentary Crip Camp. It is on Netflix and for free on YouTube. It is amazing for, I would say, parents and older children to watch. And then it has family discussion guides on their website. So you can even be guided in processing what you're watching alongside your family. So if you are looking for mothers of blind children, on Instagram we have Navigating Blindness is the handle, and Prevail and Braille Mama. And I appreciate both of those mothers because they are learning about disability. They are aware of ableism, and I think they're providing good examples.
Fabulous. Thank you for those resources. We'll try to make sure that we put some of those resources in our show notes for the podcast. So that is always helpful. Thank you so much, Ms. Rivera, for your time and all that you do. We appreciate that time you've spent giving family members who have children with vision disabilities some insight on how they can support their children, themselves, and others as they navigate this unfamiliar experience. And I have to put in a plug that people should follow you on Instagram. I learned so much, and it is so fun to see you and all the adventures that you have. I have to say, so I've been following you forever, I feel like, and I did not get the fact that you do not have a permanent home anymore until just a couple of weeks ago when you talked about that in your Instagram account. I was like, these places that she goes and travels, that's where she's living right now. So I'm always so impressed with the things that you do. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Cathy. I appreciate the plug, and I love that you're following along my adventures. I try to share authentically and create a real sense of community on my page. It's really my goal to represent and provide a comfortable space for people to learn about disability and for disabled people to feel validated.
That was so good, Cathy. I was so excited to hear Catarina and all of her perspectives on things. And I feel like her attitudes and everything, really, especially around food, kind of I connect with. I love to try new foods. And so, I mean, I know she said many profound things, but it's nice to see another lover of food who likes to travel all over and try different foods, because that's one of my favorite ways to practice self-care.
That made me think of a story that I'd heard that I never thought of before. And it goes kind of back to where she talked about finding the balance between pushing yourself and doing something familiar. I was talking with Hannah's teacher of the visually impaired one day, and she was telling me about how as her students get older, she will take them out in the community to do things. And one day she took a group of teenagers to McDonald's, and when they were ordering, they all ordered just like very similar, like basic, almost same things. And she just kind of asked them, like, why do you like that? Like, what do you like? And come to find out, that's what they had the first time they were there when they were little. And that's what they've stuck with, because they didn't know that there were other options, or that they could see a menu for like a Braille menu, or someone could tell them the options. And she said, she was like, that just made me so sad that they didn't realize that they had those options. So that just made me think of that when she was talking about food. And
Yeah,
how self-care is knowing, or it can be, knowing what the options are and having the opportunity to make a choice.
Yeah, and being adventurous. So one of the things I love about Catarina when I follow her on her Instagram journeys is that she is very adventurous, but she also knows, she talked a little bit about how that routine is kind of helpful to her to take care of herself when she's feeling stressed or overwhelmed. And I know that she loves matcha tea, and she always has a cup of matcha tea in the afternoon if she can, or she will talk about, it was a really hard day today, I didn't get to have my tea. So I like that as an adult, she knows that she can choose that thing that makes her feel safe and comforted. I think that parents can do that for their kids, right? So if they know their kids have had a really hard day, they can give them a special treat or something that they know that they're going to love. I think that's a very easy way to help children learn self-care. But they also need to know that there's times when you're having a good day, let's do something adventurous and try a food that we've never had before, or why don't we have this today? So I don't think when we're parenting little children, we always think of those things that food can be exciting or comforting. So what else? It was a true honor to interview Catarina. She is a lovely young lady, and I'm just in awe of some of the things that she has done and the way she advocates for her community. So I really enjoyed this interview this month.
It struck me at the beginning where she said that she liked the term disability to say vision disability rather than a visual impairment. And I wanted to just kind of highlight that and show, I hope people hear that she wasn't offended and you, Cathy, weren't offended. And
Nope.
neither of you were wrong. It was just the term that each of you used. And sometimes I think people get so nervous about what to say that they'll err on the side of, I'm just not even going to talk to them. And that's awful. And so to see that little interaction between the two of you that, couldn't be planned, like that was like a real life scenario, it just goes to show like it's okay. Like you can say that I prefer for you to say vision disability rather than visual impairment. And you say, okay, go with it. And there wasn't anything wrong with the way either of you did.
Yeah, it definitely was not planned. And I think it's a great example of, we talk about it's important to ask people what terms they want to use and how they want to refer to it. And that is an example of somebody advocating for themselves and what they think is important. And words matter, so we need to respect that. What was besides food, what else worked for you, Paige?
I loved how she talked about playing to your strengths with your partner. I think that's something that is really helpful maybe for our families to think about from a parenting perspective, but then also thinking about like as their child gets older and their child learns more responsibility, thinking about what their strengths are in terms of, things that they're most efficient at and how they can contribute. And it's not that she can't do the dishes. It's not that she can't do these various things. It's just she knew that she knows that she's better at like handling their trip logistics. And so why not do the thing that you are better at and let your partner shine in the ways that they are good at things. So I really like that part of self-care where it's giving yourself permission to do the things that you're good at and giving your partner permission for those things as well. And I think even seeing, maybe for your child, giving them permission to be good at some things and maybe less good at others. It's not that we are not pushing ourselves. It's just owning, okay, I know that this is something that I'm really good at and this is how I'm going to contribute to my family. So I really like that. So what do you all think about that?
Yeah, I like in that section, she specifically said we all have things we are good and bad at. And it kind of turned it to where I always think, my child or the child that we're working with at VIPS or whatever. But that's true of any child or any person. And, in what ways do I like consciously or not consciously, like we've split things up in my house. And, like my husband cooks, I don't cook. I'm not a good cook. I don't enjoy it. Can I do it? Yeah, I can do it if I have to. I don't like it. So I liked how she said, she doesn't feel bad about things that take her more time than someone else. She can still do it, but she knows there's a better way we can do this, or I can, put on music, make a moment of it, she said, that kind of thing. So I really enjoyed hearing that and thinking about it from like all sides of the family, not just your child.
I agree. I mean, that's just great information for anybody, I think, who lives in a family and has to. If you give your child, any child, the task of always taking out the garbage, well, are they going to stop eventually not liking to do that chore? Of course, because it's fun to change, to have variety in your life. And, I guess you can't really be bad at taking out the garbage, but who likes to do that? You need to switch it up sometimes. So I think it's important for us to remember what she said about like when she lived in New York in her little tiny kitchen and she had control over the things in the kitchen because everything was accessible to her, that she liked to cook. And she knows she likes to cook, but when they're out and about living in different Airbnbs, etc., then she doesn't know what is going to be in that kitchen or how the kitchen is going to be set up. So it's no longer a chore that she loves. And so we need to be willing to change to think about what our kids and ourselves like.
Another thing I like that Catarina talked about, this is not necessarily right spot on the idea of self-care, but I love that term that things sometimes can be accidentally accessible, and that she has found things that are and likes to talk about those with others. So have there ever been any experiences that you all have had with that? And Cathy, your life as a teacher or researcher, Jenny, yours as mom or for your daughter?
I think I may have shared this before, but her using an iPad, or for her, it's a Kindle Fire, but she calls it her iPad, to watch things, like whether she watches her sister's dance recital or her sister swim, she'll hold up the iPad and she's able to zoom in and see more of what's going on. And that was kind of accidental. We were going through a thing called Christmas in the Park. You know, you just drive through and there's lights. And she wanted to take pictures of the lights because she could see the lights. She couldn't see exactly what the lights made, but she could see the lights. And she just was having fun with her iPad and wanted to take pictures of it. And then she realized when she was taking pictures, oh my goodness, it's Santa. And then like she proceeded to ride through the whole rest of the thing, not taking pictures, just watching it from her iPad. So that was kind of an accidental thing that we actually use a lot now.
Yeah, that's great.
One of my favorite ones that maybe it is, there isn't accidental on, the part of, different families. Sometimes if you're just playing with your kid, you pull out, different things. And a lot of times things like a coffee can or like metal utensils, a lot of kids who we work with, and of course you're a listener, so you are connected with a child somehow. Sometimes those like auditory cues can be really helpful, and maybe you didn't even mean for that to be the case. It was just, oh wow, if I use a coffee can, cleanup is a lot easier because they can hear when the items go in. So that's something that I have found that's really accessible and makes things with our kiddos a little bit more, that they can be aware and participate a little bit more.
Yeah, I think we always need to be kind of aware of our environment and what's going on. I think she mentioned that it's one of the things that helped her when she found out about her visual diagnosis was that the technology was going to be able to be helpful to her, like you mentioned, Jenny, with the iPads and taking pictures that way, but also that she could connect with her friends still, that she could have Zoom meetings. And now she travels all over the world, and so in order for her to have time with her friends, it needs to be a Zoom meeting. And I know that I, during COVID, started doing that with my friends. We have breakfast club once a month where we have coffee and breakfast together on a Zoom meeting, and we continue to do it because we can. So, it's impossible because some of my friends have moved away. I can't go to the local breakfast place and share that with them, but I can do it on Zoom. So yeah, I think we just need to be aware, and so maybe for our listeners, that might mean that maybe your child could have story time with their grandparents if their grandparents live far away, right? So you could have a consistent time where grandparents have a book to read every month or once a week or whatever with your child, and they can get to know their voices and still have that interactive time. So this was a fun one to do, and I hope you all will.
I've been so excited.
Yeah, I hope that you will all follow Catarina she's a wonderful advocate and leads a very exciting life. So I think this week she was at the Latin dance championships. She salsa dances, which is really fun to watch. Yeah, it's very fun. And so she was at the, I don't think she was participating like competing. I don't think she was competing, but she was there and got to dance with a few of the people who were competing. So that was really fun to watch. So I just enjoy it. So there's a bunch of references or resources that she gave us that'll be in the show notes for you. And we should have something for you next month too.
Thank you so much for listening to Feeling This Life. Did you know that this podcast is actually part of a research study? By filling out the survey in the show notes, you can help our community learn more about how podcasts impact those who care for children who are blind and visually impaired. So please take a look when you're able. Also, if you'd like to support us in making more episodes of Feeling This Life, look for the donation link in the show notes. The show notes also include links to resources related to today's episode and ways to get in contact with us. Please join us again next time for another episode of Feeling This Life.